What's up, you guys? So many familiar faces on this call. Happy to see just faces as well. I appreciate the folks who are willing to come off of come and show their face on camera today. My name is Zach. I am an EC program manager, and I manage all of our workshops. I'm so excited. You know, these virtual times are tough, but one of the beauties is that we can have speakers from other places. So
and
David
people like me can
That's
participate.
right. Oh, for sure.
I would miss out otherwise.
But David did a workshop with us probably 6 weeks to 2 months ago. That was super popular. I'm glad to have him back to share more. He's in Knoxville. He'll tell you all about himself as well. But David has been gracious enough to offer 2 free coaching sessions. So if you stay on this call, make sure that your name, it looks like everyone's good at the moment. Your name is your name, because I'm going to be putting everyone into an online spinner wheel to potentially win a coaching session with David. So
cool.
Oh, you just froze.
Can you hear me still?
Yes, now we can. Oh, you froze again.
We can see you now and you're moving, but we're not hearing your volume. Yes, I can go ahead and start. That's no problem. I read that in the chat. Very good. Okay, yep. Well, good afternoon. My name is David Horsewood. I'm just a little ways down the road in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm a relatively new Nashville Entrepreneur Center member, and I look forward to engaging more as time goes by. As Zap said just a moment ago, I did one of these sessions in January, and that was on engaging virtually, which is what I call the new essential skill. And part of engaging virtually is having all of our engagements kind of be in alignment with our visions, our missions, our values, and our goals. Otherwise, we're just yakking, and we don't want to just be yakking. So if you haven't already done so, I recommend you switch your screen to speaker view instead of gallery view, because one of the things I tend to do as I go through a presentation is bump into the PowerPoint presentation and then bump out, so you're not just looking at a static image the entire time. So for those of you potentially who are unfamiliar with Zoom, just take your mouse to the top of your screen. You'll see that you can choose between speaker mode and gallery mode, and that way I'll be full screen when I pop out of the PowerPoint modus operandi, so to speak. In any event, just a little bit about me and how I came to have an understanding of visions, missions, values, and goals. When I was growing up, my entire childhood and a good chunk of my early adulthood, I didn't understand this concept. And that's not to say that I never accomplished anything. I graduated high school with pretty good grades. I was an athlete. I was actually on the swim team and lettered, and we were required both in academics and in sports to set goals. But they really weren't my goals. I wasn't really vested in them. I was just putting something on paper because I felt like I had to. So anyway, I go off to college, and wouldn't you guess that I get about 6 years into a 4-year degree, and I still have about 2 years to go. And that's what happens to me as a guy who didn't have a vision, a guy who didn't have a mission, didn't really have any values other than what culture told me was right or wrong. And all the goals I set really didn't mean anything to me. So I was just starting and stopping and starting and stopping, and that just wasn't working. I was working as a waiter at the time for a restaurant that had just opened up. I came in right when it opened, and as part of the offering to all of those who signed on right when the restaurant opened, we were given the opportunity to participate in a 6-week video training series to get a 50 cent an hour raise. So back then, that was going to go from $2.01 an hour up to $2.51 an hour. So I'm thinking big. My goal was to complete the 6-week training and get an extra 50 cents an hour. So, hey, let's go for it. I just kind of roll through the first 3 weeks. I show up in the 4th week, and my life hasn't been the same since. And it's not like everything got great in that 4th week. But that trainer said through the television monitor on a Saturday morning, probably around 9 o'clock, that there are no dead-end jobs, just dead-end people. And I remember that ticked me off. And I think the reason was it kind of described me. I was 6 years into a 4-year degree. I had a couple of years to go. But what he was basically saying is, stop blaming others for your lack of progress. Stop blaming others if you don't have a vision or a mission. Stop blaming others if you don't have direction. So I decided in that 4th week to start trying to find a direction. Now, I still wasn't into visions and missions and values, et cetera, but I did have a goal, and that was to start taking control of my life. And I just started small, and I started doing stuff, and it turned into other stuff, and then it turned into other stuff. But that's where this comes from. I don't come at this from someone who always got it. I could easily identify with George Herbert Walker Bush, you know, the first George Bush who was president, when he said the vision thing, as if he didn't really get it. And that was a guy who was clearly very successful. He rose all the way to be director of the CIA, and he rose to be president. Clearly, you didn't have to get the vision thing in order to be a successful person, because he was highly successful. And using his own words, he just didn't get the vision thing. So we're just going to kind of walk through this and see what we can do with it. Let me pop up my PowerPoint here, and we're going to get going. So the most recent time that this became something that I, in a most immediate way could identify with was this past October. My wife came to me and said, I'd really like to hike Mount LeConte. Now, for those of you who don't know what Mount LeConte is, it's in the Great Smoky Mountains. It's about 11 miles-ish round trip. And if you do a lot of hiking, that may sound like a lot, or it may not sound like a lot. For us, it was a lot. We had been basically sedentary during the COVID time. We'd gone 6-7 months without really doing anything. And just full disclosure, we'd been kind of sedentary even pre-COVID. We hadn't done a lot to stay in shape over the last few years. Our son is obviously in better shape than we were. Here's the thing though. My wife is someone who, when she decides she wants to do something, she's going to do it. Sometimes I'll let her do those things on her own. There are other times, even if I don't want to do it, I feel like I really need to do it. And hiking Mount LeConte was one of those things. I just felt like, as the husband, my vision of myself as a husband, I should go on that hike with her just in case something happens. Truth is, I wasn't 100% sure we'd make it to the top. I don't know why I doubted, because every time she has really decided she was going to do something, she's done it. She's just absolutely done it. And I should have just gone along knowing that's what was going to occur. Bottom line though, if you'll look at the camera right now, and you'll see that in the still image on the PowerPoint slide, my face looks a little puffier than it does in the video that you may also be watching right now. And the reason is, the main takeaway that I got from that trip is when we got back down to our car and my t-shirt was just totally drenched, I had decided to switch into a dry t-shirt. So I take off the one and I start trying to put on the other. But if any of you have ever tried to put on a dry t-shirt on top of kind of a wet, sweaty body, it doesn't kind of come on very well. And that image you're looking at on the PowerPoint slide, it's about 20 pounds heavier than the guy you're looking at in the video slide. That shirt really wasn't coming down very well. And all of these cars are driving by because it's hiking season, and everybody's seeing a little jelly belly on me, and I just can't get the shirt down. It was highly embarrassing. So when I got back from the trip to Mount LeConte, I just made the decision, I've got to get back in shape. And I knew better than to start with exercise right away, because I had this massive blister on my heel from the hike. So I had to wait a while for that, but I could start trying to eat better. So that's what I did. And I actually went over 100 days without having any booze at all. I had very little sweets at all. And that's going through, realize this, because this was in October, that's going through Halloween, going through Thanksgiving, going through Christmas, going through New Year's. I had no alcohol and almost no sugar at all. And I was able to slim down. At the start of the year, I heard a guy on Facebook or LinkedIn, I really don't remember which one, talk about the 50 push-ups a day challenge. I didn't bother to research it. I wasn't quite sure I could do 50 nonstop. So I decided to do 5 sets of 10. I just decided to do 5 sets of 10, and surely I can handle that. Well, I could handle it for one day. I could handle it for one day. The second day, I tried to do even 10. I couldn't do one. I don't know if you know this or not, but if you're not in the habit of doing push-ups, it's not a muscle area you use those muscles for in any other way. So I actually had to wait a couple of days for my shoulders and whatever else you call these things to cooperate with me. But now here I am in March, and I'm actually doing 100 a day, 4 sets of 25. And prior to this year, I had never done 100 push-ups in a day ever. Never, ever. Several years ago, a long time ago, I got up to doing 50 a day nonstop, but that's the most I'd ever done in a single day, was 50 push-ups. That's the value just of goal setting. But now still, we've got to get to values, and we've got to get to missions, and we've got to get to visions. Okay, so we're still here at the goal setting part. And if all you have is goals, you're going to lose interest. You're going to hop around a lot. You won't make the progress that you really want to make. And we just want to make sure that that's not happening to us as we go through life, because we really just have one shot at this. So let's just kind of briefly define these things. First up, visions are about the future, and missions are about getting from the present to the future. If you've ever Googled the difference between visions and missions, you're going to get some version of that. If you Google actual company websites, their vision statements, their mission statements, you'll find that many, many companies basically look at those two terms as synonymous. There's really no difference between the two. They both kind of feel the same, if they even have to. Bottom line, for you, if you're at all like me, and I don't think I'm that weird, a vision isn't something you can just come up with. You can't just come up with it. It's, for me, impossible to just come up with a vision. If I were to sit someone down in a coaching session and say, give them an hour just to come up with a vision for their life, I don't think they could do it unless they already came in knowing what it is. I think you either have it or you don't have it, and it'll take you a while to figure it out. I think I first gained an appreciation for this concept in a movie that came out a long time ago. Some of you might remember it if you're in my demographic, and that's City Slickers. Billy Crystal was the star, and he was going through a midlife crisis. He gathers up a couple of his best friends, and they go on a rodeo ride, so to speak. And long story short, there's a crusty cowboy who can tell he's going through a midlife crisis. And he says, look, this crisis will be over for you if you'll just figure out what the one thing is. What's the single most important thing to you? And Billy said, I don't know. What is it? And the cowboy said, I can't tell you. You have to figure that out for yourself. And as we go through this hour, I'm going to basically be sharing from my life, and your experiences don't have to be the same as my experiences. But the reality is, if you, before this hour began, didn't already know what the single most important thing to you is, you're probably not going to figure it out by the end of this hour. You're probably not. And that's why your homework assignment would be to figure that out. What is the single most important thing to you? I finally got an understanding of the vision thing, as George W. Bush called it, or George Herbert Walker Bush called it, when I got saved. That's when it happened for me. That's when I got it. That's when I grasped my vision. I knew that I didn't have to come up with my own vision. I just needed to accept the one that he was offering me. And that was to be a loving person. I'm not talking about in a romantic sense. I knew that what I was to do with my life was, anytime I interacted with someone, to the degree that it's up to me, have them be better off. I can't just want their best interests. I have to sweat for their best interests. You'll be able to know as we go through this hour if I'm trying to get to the end of the hour or if I'm trying to make the most of your hour. And that's what I hope you leave this time period thinking. It's like, wow, he was trying to make the most of this hour. I want you able to exit this hour knowing a little bit more about how alignment in this concept of visions, missions, values, and goals can dramatically accelerate the progress you can make in having the kind of life you want to have and in positively impacting other people. So that's the vision part of it. We'll talk more on all of these concepts as we go through. The mission part of it is in some ways up to you, but in some ways it isn't up to you. So just as an example, again, using me in my life, I happen to have a wife. I happen to have a son. You saw their picture just a moment ago. I have two obvious responsibilities. I have the responsibility to be a great husband to my wife and a great dad to my son. I can decide to opt out of that. I can decide to be average at that. I can decide I don't want to do that, but that's not going to go along with my vision. See, the truth is, once you are captured by a vision, it bothers you to fall short of it. It gnaws at you. If you've never been captured by a vision, then you don't even care. You can have people tell you what your vision ought to be. It just doesn't matter until you own it. Missions are just things you can do or not. It's my life. I should get to do what I want. But not only do I have a wife and a son, I also have a couple of dozen people, 3 dozen people watching this webinar right now. It's my responsibility to make the most of your hour. That's not optional for me. As soon as I agreed to do this webinar, I had to take on the responsibility to not have it be a waste of your time. So those are mandatory. You don't get to opt out of those. Bottom line, you just don't get to opt out of those. Those are ones you have to embrace. The good news is not everything is mandatory. Not everything is have to. A lot of things are get to. And we all have the same amount of time in a day. We all have 24 hours a day. And I think one of the best bits of advice that my dad ever gave me was when he said to me, David, anytime you don't think you have the time to do something you really want to do, go find someone who's doing it and ask him or her where they found the time, because they have no more time than you do. The truth is, the notion of a lack of time is really an understanding that I haven't properly defined my vision and my mission, because I'm getting lost in activities that are irrelevant to anything that I have to do and anything that I should be doing. I'm just getting lost in busyness that just doesn't have to be done, or at least it doesn't have to be done by me. In a very real sense, visions and missions target our energies. They target our thoughts, they target our behaviors, they focus our priorities, they really streamline things, and it equips us to be able to say yes to the things we ought to say yes to and no to the things that we ought to say no to. So that's the mission part. Then we move on to values, and values, or more commonly known as core values, in most places are just buzzwords. I remember for a couple of years, I did numerous training dates for a single financial services company in Virginia. And they had in the training room, right outside the door, where you kind of come in and sit down, all of the core values listed. Part of the program was to cover core values. So I gave a pop quiz at the end of every session that I did. And I said, how many of you know for sure? You'd bet your life on it how many core values this company has. I'm not asking you what they are. Do you know how many there are? Nobody even knew how many there were, let alone what they were. So if core values are to have any value at all, step one, of course, is to know what they are. And for today's purposes, I don't want you thinking about necessarily your company's core values as your own, unless you are truly the owner of your own business, because then they might be identical. I own my own business, and my core values are to be professional, respectful, sincere, and appreciative. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But for your core values, set aside your company's core values for a moment. Again, unless it's definitely your company, ask yourself, what are the guideposts that I'm going to live my life by? So for example, as a professional speaker and trainer, I don't get to consider any activity that is unprofessional, that is disrespectful, that is insincere, or that is unappreciative. There's never a good reason to be those things. To use a personal life, maybe silly example, one of the things that for years I was in the habit of is after dinner, I'd make the coffee. And after it was made, pour a cup for me, pour a cup for my wife, and bring her a cup of coffee. We've now got a Keurig, so that's a little different. We kind of each make one when we want one. But back then we had the pot of coffee going. And one of the things that I just always reminded myself to do is, even if we were having a spat about this thing or that, could have been a big deal, could have been a small deal, I still need to make the coffee, and I still need to take her a cup. That would just be a core value, so to speak, of my marriage. And I tell you what, there were many nights that it started to turn positive with just that one simple action. So the core values seem just like buzzwords to a whole lot of people, but they really aren't. They are decision makers. They are things that you don't get to decide to do something contrary to a core value. If you find yourself having to do something contrary to a core value, that means you have to take it off your list. Bottom line, that means you have to take it off your list, because it's not a core value. It's not a core value. If you're going to do it anyway, it's not a core value. There is a difference between principles and preferences. And if I'm only going to live a core value when it's easy, so let's say telling the truth, that's a core value. If you're only going to tell the truth when it's easy to tell the truth, it's just a preference. I'd prefer to tell the truth, but when it's in my best interest to tell a lie, I'll go that direction. And obviously then it's not a core value. It's something that I'll do when it's easy. I'll be a good dad when it's easy. I'll be a good husband when it's easy. I'll be a good speaker or trainer if I feel like it. Otherwise I'll just try to get to the end of the day or the end of the hour. You have to decide, I will consistently live according to the core values. And then goals, something that I'm very familiar with even since childhood, are things that should only flow out of the vision, the mission, and the values. We shouldn't just come up with a goal to come up with one. It ought to be furthering our ability to realize the missions and the visions that we've already established. So that just kind of lays the groundwork. At this point, does anybody have a question? Anything that they want to kind of throw out there? Anything you want to make sure I cover? Anybody have something like that?
Anybody? And feel free to type it in the chat as well.
Yeah, you can either unmute yourself and say it, or you can type it in the chat. Before I get into more specifics, want to give anybody a chance to ask a question or make a comment.
No, I heard you, what you said. When you have something to do, when you have a vision, let me put my picture up here. I'm sorry. When you have something to do, and when you have a vision and you're doing your best to get away, when it's a real vision that was given to you and something that you really want to get out there, it really does gnaw at you.
Yep.
You know, it's not something that you just, oh, I decided to do. You know, this is something that really, really gnaws at you when you're trying to push this thing out that's inside of you. So I agree with you totally when you said that, how true it is when your vision is something that is really with you.
Yeah, in a very serious way, Gable, I appreciate your insight there. Just today, I was having a real struggle because in addition to doing my 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups, I've been jogging around my neighborhood twice. It's roughly 2 miles. And I knew I wanted to mow the lawn this afternoon, so I was not going to jog because then I wouldn't have the energy to mow the lawn. And that gnawed at me because part of my fitness program was getting the jogging in. And as something as small as that gnaws at you, imagine, truly imagine if your entire life was aligned so that your daily activities, just by doing your daily activities, you felt like you were realizing your vision versus living a life where you feel like everything you do because you have to, and you just feel trapped. That's just no way to live. No one is happy feeling like everything I do it because I have to. It's not like you're suicidal at that point, but it is very depressing. I mean, it's probably something that causes people to not wake up as morning people. You know, if as soon as you open your eyes, you're kind of bummed out because it's a day of have to, it's just not as fun. It's not as enjoyable. And you can start
one of my favorite quotes.
Somebody else?
One of my quotes that puts you like that puts you into that space is Henry David Thoreau's "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And I mean, it's just yeah. It's like
that reminds me of one of my favorite movies, Dead Poets Society, where Robin Williams leans forward, says, "Carpe diem." Seize the day. Seize the day. Absolutely. I'm with you. Anybody else?
I'd just like to say that what you said about that, it drives you forward when we're confronting particularly large obstacles. Mm-hmm. It's that passion, and I don't know where it comes from. It's those times when you're down and out, you want to quit. I mean, really quit, you know, your back's against the wall. Yep. And there's something that just won't let you quit. Yep. And I think that's the difference. Most people surrender to the comfort zone. Mm-hmm. But for people like us, that isn't an option. Mm-hmm. And that can be very frustrating. Like that's it. I'm not going to do anymore. And the next day you get up and start doing stuff that moves you forward.
If I think back, I think it was about 10 years ago, I, for whatever the reason, started doing a lot of time management seminars. And it really wasn't my favorite subject. I like so many other subjects better than time management. But the more I taught it, the more it sunk in. And I think probably all of you have heard before that the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. So I knew all this stuff. I just wasn't living this stuff. And the truth is, whether you have a vision or not, your day is going to be busy. I mean, people with visions and people without visions, your day is going to be busy. You're going to be doing something, even if the thing you're doing is just watching TV. And I'm not saying anybody watching this webinar is just watching TV all day, but your day is filled. Everybody watching right now, your entire day is filled with stuff you have to do or stuff you want to do. Everything you do falls into one of those two categories. It's stuff you have to do or it's stuff you want to do. And anytime you're going to start doing something new, let's just say by the end of this hour, you've embraced a vision and you have a mission and you're going to be guided by values and you're going to set a goal. That means you're going to start doing something new. Well, guess what that means you're going to have to do? Stop doing something else you enjoy, because you can't stop doing the stuff you have to do. By definition, you have to do that stuff. You're going to have to stop doing something you enjoy. And that's really the brick wall that stops a lot of people if the vision hasn't really gripped them, because then they'll be saying, you know, I want to do that, but I also want to do this. And anytime you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you wind up getting neither one. It's like the parent who says, I want to spend more time with my kids and I want to get a graduate degree. So they wind up trying to get the graduate degree and trying to spend more time with their kids, but they go to their kids' games and they study while they're in the bleacher, and they go to the college, but they feel depressed that they're not with their kids, and they wind up flunking out of college with kids that hate them. So
Just one
you do have to just kind of choose. You got to choose, and you got to make it worth it. Go ahead, Kelly.
That's
You're
one
about
of
to
the
say
thing is changing our attitude about the things we have to do. For instance, I've got cats, and I changed my attitude around changing the kitty litter from it being a chore to a gift of love to them, so that they have a clean litter tray, box to, cleaning a litter box isn't fun. And one of them's just got up as I've said that.
That's right.
Changing that to, oh God, it's a chore, to, an offering of love to my cats.
Sure.
And that changes the whole attitude to a task being it's a chore, I have to do it, to no, I choose to do it because I want my babies to have a clean litter tray, and it's a loving gesture to them. Changes everything.
Yep. Excellent point. Thank you, Kelly. All right, let's dive into some of the specifics here. Next up, just to briefly talk about visions. Did any of you see the movie Guardians of the Galaxy 2? Not the first one, but the second one. We get introduced to Chris Pratt's dad, who is a god of sorts. And he says towards the middle part of the movie, maybe it's the second last third of the movie, he says, over thousands of years, I implanted thousands of extensions of myself on thousands of worlds. I need to fulfill life's one true purpose, to grow and spread, covering all that exists until everything is me. It's probably the most egotistical line in the history of the world. And it just has you realize, wow, nobody likes that guy. He went from being kind of a lovable character in a superhero movie to, wow, I mean, who wants to meet that guy? Now, at the same time, self isn't all bad. The truth is, you are who you are, and there's some good in you, and you can help a whole lot of people by actualizing what you've been gifted to do and what you've developed the skill to do and what you've acquired the knowledge to do. So there is a certain self component, definitely. But the key is you want to not just be concerned with expanding yourself, you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And the reason for that is something that every entrepreneur figures out at some point. I just today exchanged emails with a guy who last year was trying to raise money for a startup company. Somebody else came in and just dominated the market, and he wound up having to shut that company down. That doesn't mean his vision is over. It just means his mission is over. And that's the difference between a vision and a mission. Almost every entrepreneur has to make a shift from how they thought they were going to fulfill their vision. They just didn't know everything, or market conditions changed, or competition came in, or whatever it was. Oftentimes the mission has to change. This happened in a dramatic way to me last year. In March of last year, I was getting ready to do a public seminar where a lot of people would show up for an all-day event in which they would learn how to get better as presenters and storytellers. Well, COVID came, I had to cancel it. And I haven't had a public seminar since. So March, April, May, June, July, it's been a year. And I haven't done a single public seminar in a year. I had to change my mission. And it took me a while. It's not like I was instantaneously able to recover. It got till about mid-April, where I went from being a little depressed, wondering, can I even do this for a living anymore, to realizing I was spending a lot of time online. Other people were spending a lot of time online. And frankly, without being too harsh with anyone, most of us weren't looking very good online, including me. A year ago, I didn't have a good webcam. A year ago, I didn't have good lighting. A year ago, I had insufficient broadband to do a multiple viewer Zoom show like what we're doing now. I had to upgrade all that stuff. in order to do this. So my vision didn't change. My vision is still to help people, equip people, train people to be able to accomplish stuff that they couldn't do before a training session. That's still the vision. But the mission, the way I go about doing it, is dramatically different today than it was 1 year ago. So are you attached to something bigger than yourself? And if not, you're going to hit a brick wall that stops you instead of just hitting a hurdle that you're able to clear and keep pursuing your vision. Missions change. My son is about to graduate high school. He'll be going off to college. I will still be his dad, but I will not be his dad in the same way. I will not be his dad in the same way. He'll go from 17 to 18. And as I've told a lot of dads who've had their kids go from 17 to 18, at 18, if he wants to, or if she wants to, your kid can tell you to shove it anytime they want. Because they're a legal adult. You can't make them do anything anymore. So that notion of I can make them do it stops when they turn 18 years old. So the vision is still the same, to have a great relationship with my son. But the way I go about doing that, as he goes from 17 to 18, it changes a little bit. Definitely changes a little bit. So missions, as I said earlier in the hour, are what you're doing now. But now the part we're going to add is the people part. It's to whom are you responsible and for whom are you responsible? And you'll recall I mentioned I am, whether I want to be or not, and thankfully I do want to be, I am responsible to my wife. I'm responsible to my son. I'm responsible to all of you who are watching this webinar. Those are responsibilities. Those aren't optional. But then you get to the most fun part, is the voluntary part. And if you just want to combine a little something here, just in case we have some bosses watching this webinar, if you're a boss, let me just ask you this question. Would you say that many of your biggest challenges come from employees or staff or team members who could do what you're asking? They're just choosing not to. And they're not so bad that they're in any danger of getting fired. They're fine. They're an average employee. Let's just call them an average employee. But you know they could fully cooperate with what you're asking, and they're just performing down here instead. That's called the voluntary aspect of the job. That's called the voluntary aspect of the job. And truly, if you're a business owner with a team, with a staff, part of your job is inspiring people, convincing people, persuading people that your vision is worthy of them giving their lives, giving their best, giving their maximum impact effort toward. Otherwise, they're going to settle into average performance. And not only will that not have their lives go the way they want them to go, it'll stop you from having your business make the impact you were hoping that it was going to make. So that's a little bit more specifics on missions. As I said earlier, my values are to be professional, respectful, sincere, and appreciative. I encourage you, if you don't already have personal values you live by, not just to come up with them, but to define them. Because how you define the term really does matter. I have found a real easy way to define it in your own head, if you're not quite sure what the words would be, is list what the opposites would be. So I want to make sure I'm professional. Well, that means I can't be unprofessional. You know, what would be some things that would be unprofessional? I just start listing those. Well, those are things I can't do. And if I just refrain from doing the unprofessional things, by definition, I'm being professional. So it's a very helpful way. Disrespectful behaviors are very easy to list. We all know what they are. Interrupting people is a disrespectful behavior. So I need to refrain from interrupting people if I want to be seen as respectful. I need to start on time and finish on time or early. That's being respectful of people's time. So all I'm saying is not just to have the core values, but to know what you mean by them. Because the reality is, let's just think about this. My guess is, everybody watching right now, if you were to give yourself a grade on how professional, respectful, sincere, and appreciative you are, forget about me for a minute. If you just looked in the mirror and said, am I professional, respectful, sincere, appreciative? I think you'd all look in the mirror and say, yeah, I am those things. And yet, are we known by the average of our behaviors, or are we known by our worst behaviors? And sadly, because of human nature, we are most often known by our worst behaviors. So I might be a 9 out of 10, pretty good grade. On a scale of 1 to 10, I might be a 9 out of 10 on respectful behavior or sincere behavior. But I really like those sarcastic zingers. I really like poking people. Well, if I'm sarcastic, do I have any chance of being known as a sincere person? And the answer is no, those are opposites. And that doesn't mean being sarcastic is wrong. It's not a right, wrong issue. What I'm saying is you can't be known for opposites. So if you want to be known as sincere, you choose to not be sarcastic because it will defeat your ability to be known as sincere. And if you had to guess, and your goal is to get greater cooperation from other people, is it better to be known as sincere or sarcastic? And it's obviously not hard to choose between the two. So don't just choose your core values, make sure you know that the definitions of those core values matter as well. Now, here we are to goals. As I said, the goals part, I kind of got even when I was a little kid, just on the swim team in high school. But goal setting is a little tricky. It's sold as this magic pill that if you'll just become a goal setter, and I think the acronym that's still floating around out there is be a SMART goal setter. Make sure that you write specific goals that are measurable and achievable, make sure they're relevant, make sure they're time focused. That SMART goal setting process, or whatever other formula you use, it's sold as just this guaranteed way of making sure that what you set your goal for gets accomplished. And there's just two problems with that. One is it doesn't work. Here we are in March. We got one more day left in March. And if you did set a New Year's resolution, you've probably already given up on it, even if you took it seriously. Stuff got in the way. And one of the main reasons that stuff got in the way is it wasn't attached to anything. It's just a goal you came up with, but it didn't flow out of the vision and the mission through the guideposts of your core values. It was just, I'll give up smoking, or I'll get in shape, or I'll go get my college degree, or whatever it was, whatever you decided to do. If it wasn't attached to anything, you don't care that much, and you'll pretty easily just kind of set it aside. So here's my question for you. Do you have something you've been wanting to make progress on, perhaps even for years, and yet made zero progress? Now, before you answer, you might just look at those areas of life that are on your PowerPoint screen. Those are just in general areas that a lot of people find important. If there's something on there that you don't find important, you can leave it off your list. If you have an additional thing that's not there, feel free to add it to the list. But as you look at that, does something jump out at you? And if so, what I'd like you to do just for a moment, even though earlier I said go into speaker mode, I'd like us all to get into gallery mode. Just for a moment. I'm not going to embarrass anybody. I'm not going to have anybody reveal anything private that you don't want to reveal. Here's my question for you. How many of you have an area of your life in dire need of attention? And if your camera is off, you might want to turn it on just briefly, if you're comfortable doing so. I would raise my hand. I would say I have an area of my life in dire need of attention. Who else would join me in saying, yep, I also have an area of my life in dire need of attention? All right, everybody with their camera on is raising their hand. And if your camera is off, that's fine, no big deal. But I have asked that question literally for 20 years. And with almost no exceptions, people raise their hand. I'm not saying there hasn't been someone who hasn't raised his hand. What I'm saying is I've literally asked thousands of people that question. And I would be shocked if even 100 didn't raise their hand and admit, yep, there is something in dire need of attention. So that means that's the area in which you need to set a goal. That's the area in which you need to set a goal. But let's think about this for a minute, and you can go back to speaker mode if you want. What do a lot of people do, myself included, when there's an area of life in dire need of attention? What do a lot of us do? Anybody want to share what you do sometimes when there's an area of life in dire need of attention?
We do other things. We kind of avoid it. You know, we like, for instance, there's a difference from being productive to busy work. We kind of do a lot of busy work, and that's my issue. I do a lot of busy work, and my goal is to make sure that I'm always being productive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's absolutely true. I often do the same thing. In all seriousness, your marriage can be falling apart, and you're out pulling weeds because you decide pulling weeds outside is more important than going on a date with your spouse. It's nuts, but people do that. You could be in a real financial hole, and instead of getting another job or making another sales call or reducing some of your monthly expenses, you'll just go hang out with your friends and pretend it's not a problem and keep running up more debt. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. Many times when there's an area of our life in dire need of attention, we just focus on other areas and just kind of leave that one hanging there. But here's my question for you. If there's an area of your life in dire need of attention, chances are it's been that way for a while. That's how it got dire. When did you last try something new to fix that area of your life? Whichever one it was, whether it was faith or family or career or finances or whatever, whichever one it was. When did you last try something new? Not when did you last try something, because we've all heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. A lot of us keep trying the same thing over and over again. I was doing a seminar in South Bend, Indiana, up at the University of Notre Dame, and I asked this exact question. Said, after they were pinpointing this conversation we were having, it's something in dire need of attention, woman raised her hand and said, I've tried everything. I said, okay, you've tried everything. Let me ask you something. Since you've tried everything, and I don't want to waste your time suggesting things you've already tried, would it be okay with you if we make a list of the things you've tried? She said, okay. So I go to my whiteboard. I said, what's one thing you've tried? I told the person what I wanted. Okay, fair enough. What else have you tried? Well, I told them again. I said, okay, try it again. What's another thing you've tried? And in all seriousness, I kid you not, she gave up at that point. She's like, well, that's really it. I just keep telling somebody what I want all the time, and that's not working. It's like, well, that's not everything. That's one thing that you've tried a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times, but that's not everything. And the truth is, wishing an area of your life would get better is not an effective strategy. It's not an effective strategy. Prayer does sometimes work, but at the same time, so does activity sometimes work. And what's something new? What's something new? So if we go back to the PowerPoint slide here and we take a look at those areas, let's just say for the sake of argument that career is the area in dire need of attention. Most people came today. It's an entrepreneurial organization. You're probably here for mostly work-related reasons. Let's just assume for the sake of argument that the area in dire need of attention is your career, okay? COVID has hit, still with us. Doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. We hope it's getting a little bit better. At the same time, what goal could I set that would help me improve my career and I could actually start making progress this week? What goal could I set? Let's just say that career is the area in dire need of attention. My startup is floundering, my investors have gone away, my employees have quit because they had to go with the sure thing because they were running out of money, whatever it is, whatever's causing your career to currently not be where you want it to be. What's a goal you could set? What's a goal you could set? And I'll go first. I, last summer, started doing something I had never done before, which is one-on-one coaching by way of the internet. Something that you're going to get a chance to win a session of after this session is over. I had never done that before last year. And I said, you know what? If this is the new essential skill, and I believe it is, 1 year ago, nobody cared if they could engage well on camera. Now it's all most of us are doing all day long if we're in a customer-facing role. Even if you're a leader of a team, many of you, maybe all of you, are trying to lead remotely. So you now have to inspire, convince, and persuade through a camera and a laptop screen. So this is the new essential skill. Sounds self-serving, but I believe it's true, so I'm going to tell it to you. I think one thing you should definitely decide to get great at is being on camera. Don't just be comfortable on camera, get great on camera. You know, because you've attended a lot of online webinars and networking events, etc. You know that most people on camera aren't coming across as well as they could. And the good news is it's a skill, just like anything else. And the ability to inspire, convince, and persuade, even if you're really good at it in person, it sometimes doesn't work quite as well on camera. And I think one reason is when we're looking into a camera, we kind of get into presentation mode and everything comes through this veneer. And instead of looking like we're sincere and transparent and helpful and confident and humble, we just look like we're trying to get people to do stuff. Or we look like we just rather be off camera. I mean, we've now been at this almost an hour. And my guess is pretty quickly, even if you didn't consciously think it, subconsciously, you could tell if I looked confident and skilled on camera. You could tell that within 5 or 10 minutes. If I don't look like I'm glad to be here, it's not going to take you long to wish I wasn't here either. And my chance of inspiring you or convincing you or persuading you, not going to be good. But I'll tell you what, the reason I know you can get better at this is something I've already admitted to in this hour. 1 year ago, my lighting was insufficient. 1 year ago, I didn't have a webcam. 1 year ago, my broadband was insufficient. 1 year ago, I didn't know to make sure I was looking into the webcam when talking instead of looking at my laptop screen. And bottom line, it's so obvious that this is a skill that people have to get good at. But that's just one. That's just one. Maybe you can't do networking the way you used to. So you got to find a new way to network. That could be a goal you set. But what you should do, if career is your area, before you go to bed tonight, is set a goal that is 100% under your control. Nobody could stop you. Set a goal that is 100% under your control. Nobody could stop you. So for example, let's just say for the sake of argument that you wanted to get better at engaging through a webcam and a laptop screen. What's a goal you could set? And I'll spot you, sign up for coaching from me. Let's just spot you that one. What are some other obvious things you could do if you wanted to get better at this new essential skill? You could just instantly do it and never have to worry about it again.
You can practice in the mirror. Practice in the mirror.
What do we have?
Yeah, did you hear me? I said practice in the mirror.
Practice in the mirror, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you were to turn that into a goal, I'm going to practice in the mirror. You would have to pick a time you're going to practice in the mirror, right? Once you pick a time that you're going to practice in the mirror, you would have to ask yourself, what do I normally do during that time? Because remember, your entire day is already filled with things you have to do or things you want to do. So let's just say you pick practicing in the mirror from 7 to 7:15 on a nightly basis. Well, what are you currently doing from 7 to 7:15? Well, I'm watching Seinfeld reruns. Okay, well, are you willing to give that up? If the answer is no, you got to find another time, or you won't stick at it very long and you won't get any better. Does that make sense? So if you're not willing to identify what you'll give up that you're normally doing during that time, it's not going to happen. Okay, so that's one. You can practice in the mirror. What's another thing you could do? Nobody could stop you.
David, one thing that has helped me is just be part of the tutoring that some of the online places offer, like Zoom, which give a lot of the same key points that you brought up, but they help you set up and show you how to make a better presentation on camera.
Absolutely. So before you go to bed tonight,
just make you feel more confident.
Oh, you can go before you go to bed tonight. You can go to the Zoom website. There's all kinds of webinars you can attend, and some of them are live, some of them are taped, and you can pick the ones you're going to watch, pick the ones you're going to listen to, schedule in your calendar when it's going to happen, and all of a sudden start making progress. Absolutely. Those are quick fixes, easily doable. And yet here's the thing. Let's just think about that one for a moment. Zoom has been the way of the world for a year now. And yet most people don't have a very good webcam. Most people don't have good lighting. Most people don't have sufficient broadband. And we're a year in. And why is this important? Well, this is probably the most painful part of the hour. The grace period, I think, is ending. I was talking with my old college professor who's in speech communication at the University of Tennessee. And I asked him, prior to COVID hitting, how much online training and education, class leading had he done? He said 0. And neither had any of the students for the most part. So the whole goal for the last year hasn't been to get people great at this. It's just been to get people on. We just want to get them comfortable and get them on. So what's happened? We have a whole lot of people who are comfortable on camera, but not coming across very well. And frankly, for some jobs, it doesn't matter. But for other jobs, it totally matters. If it's your job to sell, totally matters. If it's your job to inspire, it totally matters. If it's your job to have students keep coming to class because they enjoy watching you teach instead of almost dreading class time, you've got to get great at this. I mean, everyone, whatever your political persuasion is now angry about schools not opening. They're angry about it because they can see their kids are getting dumber by the day. They're just getting dumber by the day because the education isn't working. And what that means is if we can't get them back in school, because we're not here to solve that political argument, it means if you're going to teach on camera, you've got to be great at teaching on camera. You can't just wait for this time to go away. It's not going away today. It's not going away tomorrow. It's not going away this year. You've got to get great at being on camera instead of just wishing I didn't have to be on camera. So that's the key thing. If you want to thrive in this current business climate where almost every interaction is going to be through a webcam and a laptop screen, this is something you have to get great at. I mean, even if you never want to be an entrepreneur, maybe you just signed on to this webinar as an employee, you just wanted to learn about visions and missions and values and goals. Even if you're in a corporate structure, guess what? Next time you apply for a job, you're probably going to be interviewing on camera. A lot of my one-on-one coaching sessions are with unemployed people who want to nail their next interview because they want to get a job and they're not comfortable being interviewed on camera. They're just not comfortable. So my strong suggestion is going back to these areas of our life. If career wasn't yours, because everybody's a little different, let's face it, some businesses are thriving right now. They're doing very well. And maybe career isn't the area that's in dire need of attention for you. Maybe it's health. Maybe it is your marriage that's falling apart. Maybe you're just lonely. You don't have any friends. Whatever that area is, set a goal in that area, doing stuff that nobody could stop you from doing. Now, if it's been something you've been trying to work on for a long time, I'll just throw out one more caveat. If you've been wanting to make progress on something, perhaps even for years, and made zero progress, my strong recommendation is you get someone to help you by holding you accountable. Okay? So if you know that you need to make 50 cold calls a day, that's going to be your goal in order to increase business for your company. And you know that you just don't like cold calls and you let some days go by where you don't make any cold calls. Well, you need to call someone. Could be your dad, could be a close friend, could be a partner, could be anybody, but you need to call someone and say, would you call me every day at such and such a time and ask me if I've made my 50 calls today? And if the answer is no, I owe you $100. So there's something in it for you. If you want to make progress on something you know you have failed at making progress on for years, you are going to continue failing unless you get someone else to hold you accountable. A lot of entrepreneurs have figured this out, myself also, the painful way. You know why most entrepreneurs fail? And that's a fact. We all know that. You know why most entrepreneurs fail? We're not very good bosses to ourselves. Sometimes we need a boss to tell us what to do. And if we had a boss, he or she would tell us to do it. We know we'd have to do it. We'd have to make those 50 calls. We'd have to prove we did it. But since we're the boss, we don't have to. And a lot of businesses fail because we're just not a good enough boss to ourselves. We won't make ourselves do what needs to be done. And that doesn't mean go get a boss. That just means go get a friend, get a partner, get your dad, get somebody to hold you accountable. And make it someone that you don't really want to start avoiding. Make it somebody you actually care whether or not they're in your life. And you will dramatically increase your chances of success. You'll dramatically increase your chances of success. So just in summary, if you want to rapidly speed up or accelerate your ability to realize your vision, then what you want to make sure to do, so my screen is locked up here. We'll just stop the share. What you want to do is either start with the vision if you have it, but you can't just come up with that one, or start with the goal, whichever one it is. If you already have a vision, fine. Craft your mission, establish your core values, set goals, flowing through all of that. If you don't have the vision, you can't come up with that on the fly. You look at the areas of your life, pick one in dire need of attention, and just set a goal in that area and just start making progress. Get some traction on that area in dire need of attention. And you will find yourself crawling up the ladder to your vision instead of starting at the vision and working your way down. I think it's better if you have the vision first, but it doesn't matter what's better. What matters is what's real. And what's real is you already have a vision or you don't. And if you don't have one yet, you'll often find it by working on the area of your life in dire need of attention. And if there's anything I can help you in regards to starting at the top or starting at the bottom of that pyramid, I'd obviously be happy to do so. So Zap, are you ready to do the wheel? I think she's coming on now. There we go. All right, it looks like our first winner is Victoria. So Zap, if you'll just make sure that Victoria and I are able to exchange contact information later, that'd be great. And James, looks like you're our second winner. And just to clarify these 90 minutes, it's a free 90-minute session. We'll just find a time convenient for both of us. Most people use it to get better at engaging virtually because that's the new essential skill. But if you have some other thing you want to work on, we can certainly do that. We can work that out later. But we'll just exchange contact info shortly after this webinar is over and schedule something, and you'll be good to go. I am not in any big hurry to get out of here. So if anybody has a comment or a question, something you'd like to share, now's the time for you to do it.
I just want to say thank you. You know, it's I wasn't planning on coming to this session, but of course Haley sent me an invite, and I was like, okay, let me jump in here. And I've actually just sequestered myself for 7 days to get some things. I mean, literally, I had to pop out to mail out a package, but I said, you know what, 7 days, that's it. I'm just going to have to work on my sales and doing what I need to do as a founder and CEO of my company. So thank you. This just reiterated it. So I'm going to get off of here and get back and shut everything off again. Thank you.
Jabel, I appreciate all your interaction today. It was nice to have you.
Hey, no problem. Thank you. It's not easy, you know, doing these things, especially in this new environment, you know, and we all need that support. I need that support, so I jump in, you know, and we all have to figure out that everything that we're doing is effective, you know, and it's affecting people, and it did today because it just was like right on time.
Yep.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Sure thing. Hope you have a great week.
Y'all have a great week too. Bye-bye.
Anybody else? I can't hear you, Zap. I see your mouth moving, but I think you're muted or something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Sorry about that. I didn't even know if you were able to hear me earlier. Sorry, I'm working from 2 laptops because I don't know what's going on. But Stryker had a question in the chat. How do you enlist the support of your employees in crafting guiding principles? Or do you create a process involving them?
Yeah, the answer to that kind of depends on how big your organization is. If your organization is bigger than one, you should involve other people. So I'll just say it that way. You should definitely involve other people if your organization is bigger than one. Now, while I say that, you are, if you're the boss, if you're the owner, you are the boss or the owner. So they don't get to do whatever they want. But for example, my son, who's 17, he's a minor. I get to, if I want to, tell him how to live his life until he's 18. Now I'll have greater or lesser success if I use that approach. But I have never mandated the core values he lives by. I find out about him and I let him come up with his own core values. And unless I have an issue with one of them, he's welcome to any core value he wants. Here's the key thing. Anybody joining your company needs to agree to abiding by the company's core values. That should be one of the questions you ask. You're inviting them into your culture. At the same time, my guess is if you've attended seminars for a while, you've heard of the 4 stages of team building before. And those 4 stages are the team forms, and then it storms, and then it norms, and then it performs. Every time somebody new joins the team, every time someone existing leaves a team, it's a new team. And fresh dynamics take over. And we should, whenever that occurs, when somebody comes, when somebody goes, we should revisit the vision and mission and core values of the organization and make sure they still apply. And if they apply, do they still apply in the same way? So there are times definitely to do that. And yes, you should involve your team in that process. But again, you are the boss, you are the owner. You do get to have your hand on the rudder, so to speak, but definitely involve them. The truth is they will have good ideas. They will have insights, not only on what the core values should be, but how to define them that you will not on your own take into account, as well as if you listen to them and come to a collaborative conclusion.
I've got one question.
Mhm.
I've had experiences where I've set goals, very strong vision and everything about it, only to not have them materialize when I've needed to, yet whatever I've put into motion comes around like 12 months later, and there's been a timing thing, not so much that there was a problem with my goal, but there's been external, a bit, COVID's a perfect example, where I had to rejuggle something. And I'm now coming back, and stuff that I had put into place 12 months ago, so sure that I would achieve the goal at a specific time. It didn't happen, but it's now coming around. So I think I struggle with goal setting sometimes, and the frustration of it, because there's a saying, there's our time and then there's God's time, and the two are vastly different.
Yep.
So I think there's an element of putting something in motion and letting go, following through with what we can do and letting go of the outcome, because we don't always know the timing behind it.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering if you've got any advice on how to deal with that.
Yeah, I personally don't use the SMART acronym anymore because people kind of got tired of it. One thing I really liked about the SMART acronym as relates to goal setting is the R, which, depending on which one you look at, stands for relevant. And the way I've always remembered that is anytime you set a new goal, you have to put it on a table with all of your other goals and ask yourself, are these simultaneously doable? Okay, so you mentioned COVID. COVID made it impossible to pursue a goal. So if something happens that forces you to do something other than the goal you were going to do, get everything on the table and ask yourself, okay, what should go? I've got to do something else. I've got to shelve this. So you should, whenever you have to make an assessment to continue or to give something up, whether temporarily or permanently, you should put it on a table with all of your other goals and say, given my vision, given my mission, what should stay and what should go right now? And then basically at least once a month, revisit that, because things happen and you want to stay on top of it. That way you will respond to a changing environment as opposed to react to a changing environment. Usually our thoughtful responses lead to better decisions than our panicked reactions. So just make conscious decisions in a timely way on how is this relevant? And it's most important to choose based on your vision and your mission. Don't choose based on fear or immediate gratification or what's easier. Go back to your vision, go back to your mission, say, which of these goals are helping me still accomplish those things? And the ones that aren't, you throw them away. I am not someone who believes in finish what you start. Never have been. I'm not someone who believes in that. If you've recognized, if you've recognized you've started something you shouldn't finish, there is no point in wasting any more time on it. I do not believe in finish what you start. As a general rule, I get it, but some people stick to that so much, they'll waste a year finishing something they never should have started.
No, I get that. And I think there's an element of doing what you can in the moment and then letting go.
Yep.
Because, which sounds weird with a goal setting, because when COVID hit, I started working on a concept online, which I then put on the back burner, and it's now come back round to be more relevant now. So it wasn't that what I did then was a waste of time. It formulated, got everything structured, presentation, everything. Then it got just put in the pigeonhole while other stuff happened. And now when I've come back to it, that's all there ready, done. I don't even have to think about it. So I'm finding it's more of a, it's not necessarily with the goal setting straight linear. It can kind of be a bit more like a mind map, where that thing got done, put over there on that section of the mind map, and then I'm brought back to this. But then all the pieces, it's coming together like a mind map more than straight line.
No, it's very true that timing matters, and you can, without a doubt, make a conscious decision to park something, knowing it's temporary, that you're going to get back to it when you can. You don't want to forget it. So Yeah, you don't want to forget
I
it, so
like
you leave
that.
it on the table, but you set it over here to the side so you know you're not working on it right now. And you don't feel guilty about not working on it right now because you made the decision to not work on it right now. So you know what? I'll look at that again next month. But for the next month, I'm not going to feel guilty about not pursuing it. It's not useful this month.
You've just clarified something for me. Park it. You're
Mhm.
you're not shelving it or getting rid of it. You're parking the vehicle. It's in its parking bay.
Yep.
And that's just brilliant.
Oh, well,
That's just helped me tremendously because I've often felt like I was giving up on something. So that shift is, no, I'm just parking it. Stick it in the parking bay.
Yep. Yep. Very good. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, there's
Any
another
other
question
questions?
from Stryker. Is there a company who has a composed vision, mission, guiding principle statement that you consider exemplary? I don't. And it's not that there aren't exemplary ones. Here's what I found out. It's not so much the words, and I wouldn't want anybody to like model their vision statement or mission statement or core values after someone else. Whatever yours is, that's what it is. See, that's the thing you want to get hold of. I kept trying to come up with a great vision statement that would help me guide my life. I couldn't do it. I'll just be honest, I couldn't do it. I kept trying to come up with one. Then I was captured by one. And as I said, for me, it was after I became a Christian. And I realized I'm supposed to be more Christ-like. And I was told the way to do that. Be a loving person. Seek the best in other people. Don't just want it, but actually try to leave them better off from having interacted with you that day. That's all I needed. So that doesn't sound very highbrow. That doesn't sound like it was crafted by someone who's eloquent. That's just what mine is. And it's mine. I mean, that's all that matters. It's my vision statement. It doesn't have to be anybody else's. It is a lot of other people's, but it doesn't have to be anybody else's. Your vision statement is what it is. And you either have one or you don't. So if you don't try to just come up with one. That's not my advice. If you don't have a vision one, don't just force one on yourself. You'll hate it. It'll make your whole life feel like have to. And vision statements should be about get to, not have to. So don't start at the vision if you don't have one. If it doesn't readily come to mind, don't start there. Start with the area in dire need of attention and just set a goal in that area. And when you see that area improve, it's going to inspire you. It's like, wow, I put some effort and this worked. And that'll push you upward to your vision. You'll find it by starting at the bottom. We'd all like to start at the vision because it's more fun. But sometimes, like me, you have to start down at that area in dire need of attention and methodically work your way up.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Not so much a question, just something that David was saying about working on our presentation skills. I know here in Australia, we've got an acting school, which has had to put all their courses online because of COVID, and they have a TV presenters course. So this is just here in Australia, but it could be worthwhile investing in doing an online TV presenters course because you're actually learning the skills for presenting online, and that just could be an investment worth making.
Sure. And
it's just a suggestion.
Oh, absolutely. I'm quite certain that's an excellent school. Just so everybody knows, I do that kind of thing as well. And for business purposes, because that's my niche, what I mostly help is business folks with trying to accomplish their business purposes. The term is storytelling, and it's branding is another term, but it's just so useful to be able to tell true, relevant stories in a sincere way that your audience can identify with. And a lot of times, people don't even think they have a good story. It's one of the main things I help people realize is whatever your story is, it's a good one. And two stories I always recommend people be able to tell concisely is how did you come to do what you do now? And who is a recent person you helped? Those two stories are just so often useful because they separate you from everybody else doing what you do for a living. The truth is, whatever you do for a living, lots of other people do it for a living too. And until someone knows you, you're just a widget. You're just somebody doing something that a lot of other people do. But when you tell your story of how you got from where you were to where you are, you become unique. And when you tell a recent story of someone you helped, you become productive. It's like, wow, okay, I can identify with that. I need help in a similar way. So in any event, I help people be able to do that, whether it's face-to-face or through a webcam. And I'm right here in Tennessee.
That's right. Awesome. Anything else? Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to send a follow-up email just so any of you can contact David and get a hold
We
of
get a
him.
copy of the presentation.
Yes. Or the slides. Are you asking
The
about the slides?
slides. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
I believe so, right, David?
That's fine. Sure.
Awesome. I'll make sure to send that out. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a
I
good
can go back to
day.
bed.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.